So what we thought of doing in this time that we have left is to bring you some of the insights that we collected during the 1.5 days of the conference. We collected through the plenaries, through the workshops, through the clusters, but also reading around and getting some information through the conference paper and through many interesting papers and other elements that were shared by all of you in our Slido space. So, Eamon, I would like to hand it to you to start and share some of your insights from these days.
Thank you very much indeed, Leah. First of all, I think everything really starts with data. We need information from data on which we can base our further work, and we need a strong information base. This is true for skills as much as anything else. So affecting sector skill needs particularly requires very sound analysis so that we can identify labour market trends and of course make informed predictions about the way the labour market is moving, and as far as we can form a view as to what the skills requirements will be going forward. This requires efficient data collection, and that is so that we can identify both skills requirements for particular sectors, but also there's a spatial dimension, so regional and member state national level requirements as well. So sound use of data that can enable us to make decisions on the design of training programs, particularly vocational educational training, and also can help us assess the need for in-country and international labour migration policies, and to ensure that we can meet labour market gaps as required. And also there will be an ongoing need for human-centred work in the future, irrespective of all the discussion about automation and digitalisation, and this will clearly require an emphasis on soft transversal skills. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of addressing these kind of requirements, very much we thought that the discussion at the conference very much actually endorsed the findings of a recent excellent Eurofound study, which spoke about 3 particular priorities for addressing skill shortages and trying to reduce mismatches, particularly advancing the attractiveness of certain regions, emphasising the migration dynamic and requirement, sectors, and indeed specific occupations, which can sometimes be unattractive for various reasons, as we have discussed. We particularly need to assist people from those groups who unfortunately continue to suffer labour market discrimination. We still have gender discrimination in the labour market. We have perhaps a lot more to do in terms of ensuring that disabled people have full access to labour market opportunities, and particularly in the current climate, an essential need to make sure that migrants are also given fair labour market access and treatment. And so all of this requires us to absolutely enhance the effectiveness of all of our labour market interventions. Leah, you have some observations as well.
Yes, thank you, Eamon. Actually, I'm going to follow what you were saying about data. And we need good data, and we need good analysis of data. That's for sure. But we also need to consider the future. So we cannot only collect and analyze data of what is going on now, but we have to integrate some trends into it. So to have the possibility to vision what is going on in there. And I think that one of the things that are happening is the European Skill Agenda is working on improving the quality of the analysis. And maybe I can just name some initiatives that are particularly important in the skills agenda. The Pact of Skills that was launched by the European Commission in 2020, and it is monitoring skills supply, skill demand, and also skills anticipation. So this will definitely help the future labor market needs. Then the skills agenda is also encouraging the use of skills intelligence both for public and for private employment services. And I think that this is the intelligence that we spoke about it quite a lot in these days, can also identify skills and trends for the futures. And finally, real-time information is needed. So to see what is going on in the job market in real time, but also communicate it in real time while it is happening. And this takes me to the next slide that is about the need to communicate data and the need to communicate data analysis, because we can use data to create more awareness and to improve our services. So we can use this data both for communication and for service design. And the way that we can go through that is that we can communicate this data through education. We can use the data to create better training programs that have valuable and up-to-date information. Of course, we can communicate and improve services through PES directly. So then we can have a timely response when we are working in our public employment services. And finally, through stakeholder networks, partnerships, and collaborations, we have said that this event is a symbol of collaboration and cooperation, and we need to know how to use and share data and analysis of data in these collaborations. Back to you, Eamon.
Thank you very much. I think one thing every single participant in this conference would agree is that it would be impossible to discuss skills without discussing digitalization. Clearly, digitalization is providing a challenge, and of course it has had the impact of being a labour market disruptor. It's had a particular impact on temporary work, and again, with the great growth of the platform economy, there have been great changes in back office processes which have made them less labour intensive and also more efficient, but great changes in the whole design and nature of occupations. Again, the whole phrase platform economy would probably not even have been mentioned by many people 10 years ago, and now it's very much a feature of day-to-day discussion. However, in terms of temporary work, temporary staff, of course, are crucial when companies are going through transitions. And as was discussed by a couple of people on a very interesting plenary yesterday, temporary work can be a bridge to permanent roles for people, particularly coming back into the first stages of labour market integration. Again, very few elements of technology are in themselves perhaps adverse or beneficial. They are, in a sort of technical sense, often neutral, but it is the way they are deployed which is absolutely crucial. And indeed, the whole growth of digitalization, automation, and the platform economy clearly requires the kind of safeguards that were mentioned very much again in our plenary discussions over the last couple of days. But with appropriate safeguards related to working conditions, there can obviously be great opportunities for people from more flexible working patterns. And indeed, digitalization can enhance the quality of work if it's implemented in the right way, taking into account the needs of employers, workers, and indeed all partners. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of this whole kind of incredibly interesting but challenging agenda, clearly and helpfully there are a number of key European Union policy instruments which are very much already in place and are supporting employment services, public employment services, other service providers, and indeed the full range of stakeholders in helping to ensure that the skills policies can be in place to support the requirement to manage this twin transition towards a green and digital economy by the end of the decade, which again is an ambitious but necessary target. And perhaps most important amongst these, but this is by far from a comprehensive and exclusive list, the industrial strategy, the Digital Europe programme, of course the Green Deal, the pillar of social rights, as Stefan Olsen mentioned this morning, with a set of ambitious targets and a very cross-cutting array of actions which are necessary to deliver these strategic outcomes, and of course the whole European skills agenda to ensure that citizens have the skills required to meet these future needs of the labour market and indeed the wider society. And Leah, I think you had some final conclusions as well.
Yes, Eamon, I think that there is still a burning issues in European countries, even those where employment rates are high. And this is the topic of long-term unemployed or inactive people in the labor market. And some insights that I have from the conference are related to some strategies that we could focus on in order to tackle this burning challenge. And again, not comprehensive, but 4 ways that we could go on strategies about this topic. From one hand, customized training and upskilling courses. And I think this has to do with understanding specific contexts, specific people, specific areas. This also goes back to the data that we have discussed before. When you have good data that you can customize the training and the upskilling courses. I think it also has to do with the micro-credentials that we've discussed. So not all of it should be long-term education, but we can also think about short modules of learning. Then the active participation of employers. So how can employers help us with activating people? Some examples of that are already happening are roadshows or work and skills week, online meeting between employers or job seekers. So strategies that make the employer very active in this view, and then personal and individual support programs. From one hand, we're using intelligence to understand and to analyze big data, but on the other hand, we have to make sure that we don't forget the personalized approach so that we can arrive to each person and be sure that using this intelligence allows us actually to be more personalized and not just standardize the offer. And then finally, I think public employment services are trying to integrate innovation in their services and non-traditional arrangements. We talked here about automation and digitalization. We also talked about the positive and the negative aspects of this, but for sure this is an innovative approach for public employment services. Other ones are going from centralized offices to diffused ones. So we can see a whole range of possibilities for the public employment services to innovate and to create new arrangements. So this is it from my insights. Of course, I think both of us, Eamon, had much more to say after these 2 days. And I'm also sure that our colleagues connected here would have much more to add to our insights. The way we can work on that, even though it's going to be very short, is just to ask you with a short poll on our Slido platform, a word. We would like to ask you for a keyword that you take away from your discussion in this year's conference. And we know how difficult it is to summarize everything in a word, but we do ask you to make this effort. So again, if you go on our Slido page and you enter the PESnet code, then you can see this new poll, which is a word cloud. Okay, so we're asking you to connect and to just give us the word that you're taking from this conference. And we're going to watch this live. Skills, I don't think it's a surprise, but it's good.
Yeah, so collaboration and cooperation, which is the conference is all about. New technology, meeting demand. A professionalized approach, which of course is absolutely important. Micro-credentials were the subject of an interesting discussion. People seeing some of the very much positives, but also some issues with their introduction. Personalized services being increasingly important, of course, for meeting the needs of those farthest from the labour market. Everything on this agenda being about social dialogue, and social dialogue being the pathway to ensuring we have inclusive policies for delivering the skills agenda. We are clearly going through a transition, which is probably an understatement, a sectoral approach being needed. We need to recognise skills. Learnability being a new word which is introduced into the lexicon quite recently. So it's no longer just employability, but being able to learn new skills. The use of data. Lots of possibilities as well as challenges. Everything being connected to everything else. The impact of working conditions. So indeed. I think the amount of different extremely relevant one-word comments made is a tribute to the kind of richness of discussion during our conference over the last couple of days, a non-discriminatory approach. And of course, this is all about inclusion and the future. Inspiring, as all of these comments are. Migration being a very important engine for labour market development and growth, of course. Validation, we had some interesting discussions about how one validates skills, particular skills which are required through on-the-job training and competencies rather than traditional qualifications. Skills without a stereotype, so ensuring that we don't actually have any kind of stereotyping in terms of the perhaps competencies people have got and their potential use in a variety of different sectors. And the growth of the social economy, which is particularly helpful for people perhaps needing to acquire skills when now some way from labour market integration. Analysis is obviously needed to see if we can get a good feel for future trends. Flexibility, absolutely. Conferences like this, which is a nice kind of comment, so we thank for that, which is a very, very nice response. And support, not sanction, so encouraging people to access the labour market through a positive kind of view rather than kind of the carrots rather than the sticks, perhaps, is the kind of message behind that particular comment. And of course, skills for the green transition, which is perhaps one of the most profoundly important issues going forward over the rest of this decade. And the wider ecosystem being important. Again, a phrase we didn't even hear about 4 or 5 years ago, but now every employment service discussion talks about the wider ecosystem and the role of all of you in this conference as partners in terms of delivering the required support services. So again, a very, very rich word cloud there with numerous insights from everybody, very helpful. Making sure, of course, we underestimate the need to make sure that we can make appropriate support for ethnic minority workers who are often suffering labour market disadvantage. Reaching out to people generally, whether that's job seekers, employers, training providers, and indeed a reference to working conditions. We've heard a lot about the whole agenda of trying to ensure that we can deal with the issue of some unattractive occupations, which can be linked to working conditions to an extent. Lifelong guidance, of course, necessary in a very changing world. Nobody can actually train and then fail to do any more training for many years. It's about an ongoing process to ensure everybody takes the responsibility to keep up with labour market and skills trends, not least the technology. A European approach was mentioned, which of course is always essential to learn from good practices and share and meet these challenges collectively and jointly, and perhaps ensuring that no one is left behind through delivering person-centered services.
This is so nice to see, right, Eamon?
Indeed, yes, indeed. We were not sure how many people would be mentioning these kind of ideas in the word cloud. We weren't sure whether there would be kind of a few seconds or quite a lot longer. And clearly, many people have got lots and lots of very, very interesting and helpful reflections on the conference, which is absolutely excellent. The need for ensuring there is good career guidance. We are talking more and more now, aren't we, about career guidance to enable people to manage transitions and not just the previous role of employment services in matching somebody to one particular job. So again, a particular relevant comment on the way our jobs are changing in response to these trends in the labour market and the world of work. So again, very, very interesting observations from everybody. And it is all about making sure that people are provided with the opportunities that they need. And part of this is, of course, through ensuring that we are having appropriate collaborations. Do we now need to move on to our final comments?
Eamon, because we would like also to hear from our great moderators.
Indeed.
Yeah. And they did a great job in the classes and in the workshops, and I think they have their own insights to share with us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just call them one by one, and each of them is going to give us a word of what they are taking away from the conference. Then I would like to begin with Ed Thorpe, please.
Thank you very much, Liat. Yes, I had the privilege of moderating Cluster B, meeting the needs of the future labour markets, and then a workshop on managing smooth career paths. And then today, Cluster D, looking at untapping potential towards the labour market of the future, and a workshop on modernising vocational education and training to untap potential. You'd be glad to know I'm not going to feed back on everything that we discussed. That would take too long. I'm just going to kind of give you my kind of big picture takeaways and impressions from the conversations that we had. Something that really struck me at one point, it was in one of the presentations, was the sheer breadth of target groups that we're talking about. I think sometimes if you ask the man on the street, they think about public employment services, they think about services for the unemployed, trying to find a job. But we were talking about supporting people who are unemployed, supporting people who are in work, this issue of career transitions, increasingly looking at tertiary education, secondary education, even primary education, notably in the context of, if you want to tackle some of the gender stereotypes which are impacting decisions much later on and impacting in the labour market later on, some of the activities that people are talking about starting in primary education even. And if you're going to do all this and address all these target groups, helping people throughout their careers, that clearly has impact potentially on the potentially evolving mandates of public employment services. Also changing perceptions, like I said, making people that maybe later on in their careers realize that accessing the services of the public employment service could be relevant for them. And with a nod to something that's been mentioned already by you guys, and also last year's PES Network Stakeholder Conference, the importance of partnerships, because it's going to be impossible to address all those different groups and all those needs without effective partnerships. And then the final thing then is that I think sometimes if the idea of addressing all these challenges can potentially seem quite overwhelming, and it's certainly not going to be one solution to tackle all this. And so exchange across Europe in terms of what works is really important. And it was really nice in the workshops to be able to dive into some of those practices that had been identified. And I was particularly struck by the particular reference with the public employment services, but for example, the Croatian PES has been working to really integrate career guidance into the mainstream employment counselling that it offers. And the Portuguese PES is doing a lot in terms of vocational training and making that a core part of its activities. So there's some real inspiration there to share amongst PES. Obviously, the PES network will, today or the last couple of days has been a great opportunity to start doing that. PES network will continue to offer those opportunities for exchange and learning. And obviously the challenges ahead, so we wish everyone lots of luck.
Thank you, Ed. Perfect. And I would like to call in Marjolaine Peters.
Okay, thank you. I understand we're supposed to be brief.
Yes, thank you. That would be perfect.
I'll be subjective and personal, and just you pick up a couple of things that really struck me during this conference. And I'd like to start out by saying that I was really happy to see that this sectoral approach this time again really came to the fore. And This is a personal remark because in the course of my own working life, we've seen these sectoral initiatives in the Netherlands, but also in Europe, and I've been involved in them. And I feel that really now, once again, we know that this is important for PES to also involve, to work at this sectoral level and find solutions, especially, I think, in relation to skills shortages and surpluses. I was struck very much. I've been in most of my many of my sessions, mediation, matching between supply and demand was discussed, and we had some really good examples from member states, from PES, what they were doing there. And I was struck from the beginning by the idea that matching nowadays is not just about matching candidates and qualifications, but that skills and skills improvement is really a part of this whole matching process, and that there's concrete initiatives going on already in PES to do this. And I think it was interesting that on the one hand now from candidates, you don't only expect a certain qualification, but you expect a certain attitude, a willingness to learn, a willingness to improve your skills and acquire new skills in your job and in your working life. And at the same time that also employers, of course, are offered possibilities to hire people that may not be perfect for the job at the moment, but with some skills training and with some help from the PES, they are able to acquire people and then hire people that are actually in need of a job. Also, I think this whole discussion underlines the importance of career counseling, that PES, we see that PES in Europe increasingly participate in career counseling and get a far bigger role than just career counseling to job seekers. And I think it's nice to see that underlined here. I'm always, impressed by how innovative public employment services are and how they develop their own new tools, how they incorporate digital services into their work. And I think paperless mediation as such is not yet a reality, but we see movement in that direction. And it's interesting to see that in countries like Greece or France, which in many ways are opposite, in both cases, these digital services really help the PES to improve their matching services to employers. And as a result, I think really contribute to helping employers deal with labor and skills shortages. I'm not sure, Liat, whether I can say anything more.
No, this is great.
Then I'll
Thank you
leave it
so much
at this point. Okay.
Thank you so much. And then I call Michel Paromingo, also asking you to keep it short and give us your personal insight.
Sure. A lot of insights. If I was choosing a word for the word cloud, it would be asset. That's a word that stuck with me. It was in the context of attractiveness of jobs discussed today. And the context was that the biggest asset in a job, the biggest asset in the skills environment is the job seeker. And while this seems like a very clear thing, services are more revolved around that. So at the heart of human-centered services, human-centered employment services, is the perception that the job seeker is the asset. And when it comes to attractiveness in the particular context, if we talk about making jobs more attractive, the first place to go is to the job seeker and ask the job seeker what they consider an attractive job they would like to go into, rather than having the employers think out what an attractive job is or the public employment service. So I think that's a perception change that is very conducive, very helpful to make the services more human-centered. And the second thing, and with that, I would like to conclude already, a lot has been said about data and about data analysis. But what stuck with me from a discussion yesterday is that data works only if you break it down to all the target groups that need to work with the data. And breaking down means reducing the data to what it is, having informed data reduction, if I may call it like this, starting from a very large data set with good analysis, but then breaking it down to all the target groups. And the target groups are job seekers, the target groups are employers, but the target groups are also the people in the public employment service who often don't understand the data because it's too complex or not targeted at their work, and also other partners, including the media. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. And I would like to call Nicole as well, please. Is she here? I can't see right now. Maybe we can start then with Annette Scopetta, please.
Yes, hello. One
Thank you,
sentence or
Annette.
two for inspiring
Perfect.
words of what I've taken with me from the 2 days. I would say how we do things, how we implement things. There was a question raised today, which was risen in terms of the inclusion of persons with disability in jobs, and it was the question in terms of, are there any limits? And the answer was yes, there are limits, but the limits are not on the persons of disabilities. The limits are on us. The limits are on our structures and our systems and our regulations, which we put on the place. So what was really inspiring is if we really look at the practices and how we move further towards the change, we already have done quite a lot during the past. And I'm somehow convinced that this transition period in which we are all, this just transition period, we really have to take care on that it is something where we move in a direction which we really want to. And this is inclusion. And I think the examples which we saw are really inspiring, from the really practical implementation on how we do break down national or international strategies into ways of including people, social inclusion, not just labor market inclusion. The other thing is also in terms of research, how we really understand the facets of the labor market in order to really offer ways of how we really capture the different activities. And we have seen really nice examples in Italy in order to really check down to the level of the tasks of what the different professions are. And both of these examples, or all of these examples, give me a kind of a positive, let's say a positive conclusion towards we need to change. We cannot stop in terms of not going further, but I think we are on a good way, and let's hope that, we make this just transition, the green.
Positive and optimistic.
Positive and optimistic. Thanks.
Thank you, Annette. And now Nicola is ready. Please, Nicola. Go.
Yes, sorry, I had that.
No worries.
Sorry. Yeah, so perhaps to respond to these optimistic view, a short haltering, I'm not so sure if really all main groups you have on the labor market will be fit enough unless we make a major effort to make them fit. You said it at the beginning, starting from young ages. I think we see that skill shortages are very high in what we need, IT, engineering, and women are really strongly missing here. And that, I think, is really a huge issue. And therefore, I would be optimistic, yes, somehow we will manage, but it will be a major effort, I think, to bring and to use the potentials and to bring more women into the needed skills and occupations. Otherwise, I think inspiring was really the both understanding, and that's more on the optimistic side, the understanding that you need short-term solutions to adapt to certify skills, to adapt quickly to what is needed. We have skills gaps which do perhaps not need a very big retraining, but retraining can be done on the job, can be done with small courses, but all that embedded in larger research, in forecasting of what the big trends are for the training providers in the bigger scene. So I think these short-term, small-term, structural, formal, informal, non-formal training, and bringing these bits together. And there's, I think, where you need the cooperation of all actors very strongly, that this flows smoothly. I think that was, for me, also an important takeaway.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nicola. Thank you. And thank you for all your insights. Eamon, I bring it back to you for some final words, and then to bring it to our final conclusion remarks by Johannes Kopf.
Thank you very much, Leah. I think as we started that very interesting round just now, Ed mentioned the variety of target groups. And in meeting this variety of needs, it's really all about maintaining employability through learnability. We heard that it's now people need to keep on being involved in learning to keep pace with change. There are clearly challenges in managing perceptions and trying to deal with the implications of those perceptions to make sure that we can perhaps deal with some of these bottleneck sectors. The whole skills agenda seems very much like quite a complex jigsaw puzzle, and the only way that one can put all of the pieces together in a way to really make the kind of required changes is by getting input from all the stakeholders involved, whether they're employers, unions, job seekers. Everybody needs to be involved in the dialogue, because everybody has a different piece of vital information that is most relevant to them, and putting it all together can help us to devise policies to meet these challenges. It's clearly really very important to have a sector-specific approach, and we should emphasize that in all of our interventions. There was a PES conference about 15 years ago that mentioned at the time the big gulf between employment counselling and careers counselling. I think a message from this conference is that with the whole changing world of work and the need to meet the skills requirement and bridge the skills gap, in a sense, employment support and career support will need to converge, and they'll perhaps become one overall support service in a not too distant future, because everybody will need to manage their transitions as they go through their working life. So services must clearly be person-centered to deliver this kind of career counselling and transition management. There is an absolute plethora and massive data, but as Miguel mentioned, the risk is lots of data, but not much information. So data should be put in a very user-friendly format to ensure that job seekers, employment counsellors, advisors, employers, everybody can understand exactly what they need to know from the data to make the most informed decisions. They need to do this in the context of the required infrastructure. So we need a skills infrastructure upon which to deliver all these policies. Ideally, a very supportive legal frame that helps ensure we balance the interests of all the people involved in the labour market. And finally, we need to carry on learning. The pace of change is moving more and more quickly. And in order to keep up with that, we need increasingly kind of well-developed research to support our forecasting activity. So they were my kind of 2-minute conclusions from the event. I'd now like to hand over to our PES Network Chair, Johannes Kopf, for some of his final comments. Thank you very much, Johannes.
Thank you, Eamon, and many thanks to Viet and Eamon, to our moderators for wrapping up, and for your excellent work over the last 2 days. Thank you, Eamon. As a small thank you, because you're sitting in the dark, I send you a new table light. Thank you. Dear colleagues, what we have all learned over the last 2 years is showing flexibility, and this time with some technical problems, but showing flexibility is one of the strengths of our wonderful PES network. So that all has also worked. Thank you to you all for your patience. Over the last 2 days, we were close to 300 participants from more than 30 countries and from a broad range of horizons and organizations. Of course, my friends from the European Public Employment Services, but also a lot of local authorities, private employment services, businesses, education, training providers, academics attended the meeting, the European Commission and other international organizations. I was also pleased as well that we were able to have an exchange with the social partners on many levels at cross-industrial level, but also from a range of sectors, construction, hospitality, tourism, and so on. I really was delighted by the discussion yesterday in the morning of social partners and so on. Although it would have been, of course, it would have been nice to meet in person as we have done in 2019. One of the advantages of the online format, of course, is it allows us to bring together an even larger community. So I've seen people even from countries outside of the European Union. So really, we were very happy that you joined our meeting. Yeah, Eamon and Liat already summed up the meeting. What we tried to find at least was some answers on how we can jointly address, on one hand, the shortages, and on the other hand, to prepare for European future labor market. My colleague Julian told me that there was a very open exchange in the workshops. I was not able, unfortunately, to attend yesterday afternoon, where it was about where we are doing well and what's in my experience, even more important is where we can do better collectively. An overriding message I will take with me, I've picked up, is that the future labor market is already here. Our labor markets are changing incredibly fast, and even this change has accelerated or speed up. Digital and green transition, twin transition, so as Eamon said, I think are not any more future topics. Labor and skill needs are already there today all across our economy. What we can't afford as public employment services is just to wait and see how tomorrow labor markets might develop. And we have to be extreme, I would say, humble, and admit that we can't always show what will be, not show us. We can't know what will be needed in 5 or 10 years. That's clear. The companies doesn't know, we doesn't know. So there is, I would say, a regular changing and accelerating market. And what we really need on that vulnerable and also volatile situation is a regular exchange among ourselves. It's absolutely essential to monitor developments on the ground. Yeah, what are the key areas of future cooperation? Of course, our discussion has highlighted some new areas for cooperation. I would say, for instance, to improve the attractiveness of certain sectors. This is something certainly for some PES, for many PES, a new field, but an area where we can certainly reinforce our cooperation. It's about working together with employers, with representatives of employees. It's really about, helping these sectors to find workers. Although unemployment is going down quickly, that's an interesting point, I would say the importance of PES work is increasing. And this is not self-evident, as when you think on former times, unemployment was going down, well, then PES are less important, but the things are changing now. This is a good point, I would say, and a good development. We also have to stepping up targeted and individualized career guidance, because this is in fact the way to ensure that we get to know the potential, the skills, and also the aspirations of every job seeker we support. And this is essential for the development of the whole European businesses, branches, labor markets. We need to strengthen our cooperation with VET providers, with social partners, and those that are responsible for the recognition of qualification. An important point also now with the actual situation and the integration of the Ukrainian people into our labor market. The classical full match, what we have done in the past, is no longer possible. We all have to, and we all work on matching with competencies and skills. In some cases, or in many cases, with shorter and targeted education within our training measures. All in all, I would say, and it was very clear on the Slido page at the end, I love the picture, the word cloud. Everything is more complex now. Just think of the term twin transition. This is complex at all. And now we have to also to deal with a twin crisis, I would say. COVID is not over, and Ukrainian people are fleeing their home country. But the good news, I would say, is that all of us are absolutely focused on doing that, focused on making, I think making the best use of the potential of the European citizens on the labor market. This has to do, as I already said, with partnerships. The employment service, my colleagues, we all have to work together with our partners to achieve these objectives, because it is a more complex world. Now the recovery from the pandemic is coupled with the humanitarian crisis. Once again, it will require all of us to act flexible, to accommodate changes. it's of course essential and crucial to stimulate the discussion in that situation, to exchange ideas, to disseminate knowledge in that field. Maybe it's interesting for some countries that those countries who will already have a lot of experience in integration of the people from, for instance, Syria, Afghanistan over the years, maybe these experiences are now useful for countries like, I don't know, Spain or Poland, where many Ukrainian people arrived during the last 4 weeks. There will be more opportunities, and there is need for more opportunities to continue our exchange. We will start with a webinar on new forms of supporting and support employers before the summer. I think especially find new formats, find new subsidies, find new models of supporting employers in a really volatile and changing time is something we in the PES have to develop. You will also, of course, receive very soon the presentations for this conference and something like an outcome paper. Thank you really once again for your contribution. I'd like to thank all the participants for being here, for your excellent contributions that were, I would say, at the core of the event. I would also like to thank my colleagues from the PES Secretariat at the European Commission for organizing this event. I know how much work it requires. We had already an intensive exchange in preparation, and when a meeting is online, it looks like it is less work, but it isn't, not at all. So really a big thank you to my colleagues in Brussels. Finally, I would like to thank the organizing team from our contractor, the interpreters for making this event possible, and for you all. I wish you the best for the Easter vacations. I hope you have some for you and your families, and I really hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johannes, and thank you for giving us your insights. And I think that for everyone, this has been a great opportunity. Eamon, I pass the words for you. Johannes already thanked many people, but I think we need just a short list to be able not to forget anyone.
Okay, well, again, I'd like to echo our thanks to Johannes for those very inspiring comments on the conference. Also, I'd like to pass on our thanks to a couple of people who unfortunately couldn't be with us due to other urgent calls at short notice, but thank the Commissioner and indeed Spiros, our PES Network Vice Chair, for their messages, particularly, and again, very much from a personal perspective, I'd like very much to thank Elodie and her team at the PES Secretariat, Paulina and Yasmin, for all of their incredible hard work in recent months. As Johannes said, there is an incredible amount of work which goes into planning these events, and also to representatives of all of the 32 PES Network members who were all very much involved as well in inputting to the agenda and planning this event over the last couple of days. I'd also like to thank Leah for her excellent kind of support in moderation and facilitation.
Thank you very much, Eamon. I think we can thank all speakers for the great contributions, the moderation and the facilitators that made this dialogue possible. Thank the whole organizing team, but especially Chiara, the tech team, the interpreters, all the participants, of course. And Eamon, thank you for being here with me.
Thank you. And so, again, as Johannes said, great advantages from the virtual kind of format that we didn't really consider before COVID. However, it would be very nice to meet up with lots of long-standing friends and colleagues face to face again after seeing everybody only through a screen for now more than 2 years. So perhaps we can be meeting face to face next year. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Yeah.